against Orpheus as Zero Karma. So what do you think of this particular matchup? I believe the Karma Lux might have a better advantage for this particular matchup.
I'm inclined to agree with you. Back when, Karma Lux was a very prevalent deck in the meta, people were
Hmm?
choosing to play that over things like the Karma Ezreal and the Heimer Vi. I don't think the nerfs to the Karma Lux deck necessarily impacted the Ezreal matchup too much. Losing the attack on the Badger Bear and the Grizzled Ranger, was sort of a big hit, but I don't think this was necessarily the matchup where that's going to play against him. Although Hai did bring a pretty anti-aggro version of this deck, there's a couple of cards that aren't going to work out for him super well. But we've seen Radiant Guardian do a lot of work for players so far today, and that is just another card that is difficult for Orpheus to remove. And if he can get these, like a Remembrance down on 3,
Hmm?
as long as you can get big units out fast enough, the Karma Ezreal decks are going to stumble a little bit. They don't really have the tools available to them to deal with things like that. We're not seeing a lot of 3 damage spells coming out of them anymore.
Right, and here we see a Remembrance coming down from High on turn 3, and immediately a Denying coming down, denying Remembrance. So, how much of an impact would this Remembrance actually affect High at this point?
It would depend on what he got. If we saw a Great Horn come out, that represents half of Orpheus's life total on turn 3, and that could have been massive. But so far, I think every time we've seen a Radiant Guardian on 3, it has hyper low rolled, or every time we've seen Remembrance on 3, it has hyper low rolled into that Radiant Guardian, just getting that
Yeah.
vanilla 5/5, which is definitely the worst, sort of pull into a deck like this.
Hmm.
The Swiftwing Lancer gives you an advantage. The other unit has tough. The other one's a scout. And I think if he got, an average roll, we could have seen High start to take over the game with that play. So I do like the deny coming out from Orpheus. There's not a lot that he cares about denying in a matchup like this. And I did have to go back and check his deck list because we are consistently seeing Karma Ezreal players cut down on that card, but Orpheus is still sticking in there with 2 copies.
I believe shifting down into the meta right over here. I believe that the power level of Deny has been slowly rising right now compared to Wheel of Ionia, as there was a period of time where Wheel of Ionia is really strong compared to Deny, and it feels like Deny is actually catching right up in terms of power level.
Yeah, we're even seeing a couple versions of Heimer Vi running the full 3 copies of Deny, and it's kind of weird just because typically Deny was something that was getting cut down on because it was very ineffective against the aggro decks. If you look at something like Kinku Elusives, which was sort of the premier aggro deck for most of Runeterra's lifespan, there's not a lot that you can deny in that deck. It's mostly burst speed combat tricks, but now that we're seeing Noxus and especially Shadow Isle start to take over the format, Harrowing is something that you have to have a deny for. Decimate is a phenomenal deny target, and it's just opening up more and more possibilities. There are a lot more spell heavy decks coming out
Mm-hmm.
of the aggro sort of strategies in Runeterra.
Devin, here we see on turn 6 a Lux coming down just in time, and what do you think could be highest possible play at this point of time? As we believe like the Lux is probably not going to stick for the next few turns.
I think that High might be trying to bait something out of Orpheus here. If he can, like, Orpheus has the possibility. This is exactly what I was thinking. So you go for the Mystic Shot. Orpheus goes for the Thermogenic Beam, and that second copy of Lux has turned into Prismatic Barrier that's going to be able to completely block that out, as well as bank a little bit of spell mana into her. And now with Thermo Beam out of the way, Will of Ionia and Thermo Beam are really the only ways to deal with Lux in a deck like this. The
Mm-hmm.
reason that this doesn't have as good a matchup as something like the Braum Swain is because you don't have a high density of these high health units that your opponent has to deal with. Swain, Leviathan, Braum, these are all cards that demand to be answered very quickly. Lux is really the only one in a deck like this. Radiant Guardian, you can kind of let sit around for a little bit. Karma is something that you're going to need an answer for as well, but that's not going to come out for a couple more turns.
Okay, Blinding Assault coming from High. It seems like High's hand right now is fairly limited in options. But however, he have like a combat and strike available as well.
Yeah, and I like this Blinding Assault. It does open up, if Orpheus wants to throw out a Will of Ionia in response, then High can still throw down Concerted Strike or Concussive Palm, get the level up onto that Lux, and at least get the Final Spark immediately, as well as have a leveled Lux in hand as opposed to an unleveled one that he has to bank a lot more mana into.
Yep, and here we see an attack from the Veiler hooking in Shadow Assassin for the kill over here. It seems like a static shock over here would be great from Orpheus' side of the field.
Oh, but it's actually just going to be a Mystic Shot, and I'm wondering if we're going to see the single combat come out. It looks like Hai is, a little bit wary of the possibility of a static shock coming out in response to, the single combat. That Lux is only one spell mana away from leveling, and Hai going to be pretty happy to take this pass, bank up a little bit more mana, and now he has an automatic activation if he wants one.
Yep, and just a little on the side note, his health is going down really at 14 right now. Against a Karma Ezreal, you probably do not want to be around 10 health range, or they could easily down from 10 easily.
Yeah, it's a really scary situation to be in, and now Hai has a decision to make. You can fire off sort of this ineffective single combat just to get the Lux leveled up. You could fire off the Prismatic Barrier just to get the Lux. That doesn't seem like a great play. Or you could just let this Will of Ionia go and replay the Lux after the fact. I think Hai's going to want to take advantage of the 5 spell mana that he does have banked, though, is going to protect his Badger Bear in the process and level up this Lux.
So with a level up Lux in the field, it's going to be so much easier for Hai to control the board later on into the game.
Yeah, and because he does still have that 5 mana available to him, if we see something like, a second Will of Ionia come out, he does still have the option to take out this, Claws of the Dragon that's going to give him the final spark regardless. That's going to let him take out the Shadow Assassin. And he's stabilized at 14 life, which is not necessarily a bad place to be at. As you had mentioned, this is an Ezreal deck. This is a Karma Ezreal deck specifically. You're going to have to, play a little bit scary with your life total at times. But, I think Hai is in a better position to get down a leveled Karma and level Lux before Orpheus is going to be able to get down a leveled Karma and a leveled Ezreal.
But as you can see here, Orpheus allowing combat to go off and Lux leveling up over here, providing Hai with a single copy of Final Spark over here, trade to kill off the Shadow Assassin.
Yeah, and I think that, there was a consideration to just let the Lux get willed, replay the Lux after the fact, but given the state of Hai's hand only having 7 mana worth of spells available to him, I think it was kind of important for him to level that Lux and get down, just get that extra 1/1 stat line onto her, make her a little bit more resilient to Thermo Beam and a couple of, spells strung together. And, it was going to be really hard to level her if he did just replay her after the fact.
Yep, and passing turn over to Hai. Hai have his 6 damage open for him to attack right now. Would he go for the open attack at this point of time?
I don't think there's really a punish on the side of Orpheus if you do want to play this Lux. Concussive Palm is sort of the biggest one that I can think of. You are going to push through the same amount of damage. You're just going to lose a unit to the blocker.
Yep, and here we see a Concussive Palm coming onto the Lux, providing Orpheus with an extra blocker.
Yeah, it's still going to be Hai coming out on top of this one, pushing his opponent down to 12 life. Could play the Shadow Assassin as well if he really wants to push through a lot of damage, but overall, I think this Lux is going to be pretty safe. The concern with playing the Shadow Assassin is that does mean that Orpheus is going to be allowed to play a Karma uninterrupted. You're not going to have that Concerted Strike mana to get it out, and he's going to get to double up on whatever spell he wants to start off the turn. And if it's Rummage, you could find yourself in a world of hurt all of a sudden.
So it seems like Hai is going for the Shadow Assassin play over here and drawing the Radiant Guardian off the top of his deck. Seems like it's a little bit of a stressful position.
Yeah, I'm not really in love with either player's position currently. I think this one is still pretty far from being decided. Orpheus, we have no idea what's in their hand. I actually have lost track of where the Ezreal is at this point. I think it's hovering around the 4 or 5 range. I don't know if you've been keeping track of that one a little bit better.
It's probably at 4, I think.
We'll go with 4. 4 sounds good. And this is that Karma that I was worried about. He went for the Shadow Assassin play, and this is the punish that Orpheus had available to him. With 3 mana, he knows that there's nothing that Hai can play to kill this Karma. He's going to get his free spell, going to get that leveled Karma, and if Rummage is the play off the top, or if he randomly created something like a True Shot Barrage, this could totally swing the game back into Orpheus's favor. It looks like Orpheus just kind of taking the time thinking about what he wants that first spell of the turn to be. High now does have upgraded karmas of his own available to him if he wants to throw down, a deep meditation on top of that. But first, we're going to see Will of Ionia onto the Lux to start off the turn. High just, Orpheus just wanting to take this mana efficient play against High, wants him to recommit the 6 mana to the Lux. And without a karma on board of his own, I think High's just going to have to let this one go.
Yeah, but no, does this concerted strike over here onto the Karma have been better? Oh no, he will just play into deny, right?
Yeah. And I think that's why we're seeing High play his Karma instead of replaying his Lux to open up that concerted strike as a guaranteed answer onto Orpheus's Karma.
And at the same time, Orpheus also have lots of ways to deal with this Karma at the time as well.
Yeah, I mean, with the Karma on, this is like such a hard scenario to cast when both players have the Karmas out and a bunch of mana available to them. Whoever blinks first kind of loses, and now we're actually going to see the Karma Ezreal down as well. And this is sort of the situation that this match is going to find itself in. Whoever gets both of their leveled champions down first is pretty likely to win, and Orpheus just drew more Will of Ionias than High did.
Yeah, it seems like having both Karma and Ezreal on the board right now, it's looking very unfavorable for High at this point of time.
Yeah, and it looks like Orpheus is just going to be willing to take that pass. That does mean that High is going to get down the Lux to start off the turn. And now we have a very interesting game on our hands. As High does have that Karma's Insight of Ages, the Deep Meditation. He doesn't have as much mana to play with as Orpheus, but he does also have a potential. Both players have potential lethal on this turn.
It all comes down to the hand of Orpheus. Does he have any burst spell, burst speed spell to burst High down from 14 to 0? Here we see Rummage firing off, and that is gonna be 4 damage to High's Nexus, him down to 10.
And Orpheus discarded 2 burst speed spells off of that Rummage, so I would have to assume that he's got lethal available to him here.
And another health potion, bringing him down to 6. And a second Rummage coming in, bringing High down to 2. And probably, I believe, Orpheus have the game.
Orpheus still has 10 mana available to him. There's nothing he can't have at this point.
And a Karma Insight. And that should be it for game number 1, with Orpheus taking round 1 against High over here with his Karma Ezreal. So we actually get to see the power level of Karma Ezreal, right? Like with both Karma and Ezreal on the board, they could just burst you down from wherever you are down to 0 as soon as possible.
Yeah, and that's why it's always a little bit weird to take an Ezreal deck into a tournament when you don't have Karma in the list as well. We see this Twisted Fate Ezreal or the Bilgewater Ezreal in general, just not having that insane power level of the Ezreal, like the full power of Ezreal available to them, where you get to, throw out those, only 5 spells away from winning the game at that point.
So we're moving on to game number 2 with High with his Karma Lux against Orpheus's Braum Swain. So this is the matchup that we were saying, right? Like, they have Orpheus. High have to take out the Leviathan Swim and Braum as soon as possible, or he's gonna be like in really, really huge trouble.
Yeah, I think that the loyal Badger Bear is going to play pretty well for High in a matchup like this. It staves off a lot of the early aggression of your opponent, but turn 3 Remembrance is still going to go a long way, as that is sort of the one thing that you can do in the first couple of turns that Braum isn't going to be able to hold a candle to. And High doesn't deal with wide boards super well. That said, Orpheus is a pretty damage-based removal deck, doesn't really have the tools to deal with the Lux. Once that comes down, it's going to be pretty safe on the side of High. It's going to take at least a Ravenous Flock and another spell, and there's a lot that High can have to sort of counteract that with the prismatic barriers coming out of the additional copies of Lux, just sort of stopping that play from Orpheus, who has stumbled here in the first couple of turns.
It seems like Orpheus have nothing on the first read. Or does Orpheus has to play at this point of time? Highly likely we would see a Braum coming down.
Yeah, that seems extremely reasonable to me. I don't think that there's really anything else that Orpheus could have available, floating these first couple of turns. Arachnoid Sentry still could be there, Imperial Demolitionist. There's a lot that The early game of this Braum Swain deck is actually very reactive unit-wise.
Hmm?
It's Iceveil Archer, Imperial Demolitionist, Arachnoid Sentry, things that require a specific board state before they start coming down. Kindly Tavern Keeper as well. Babbling Bjerg could be the play, but instead we are going to see the Braum, as you had mentioned.
Yep, and compulsive pump onto the Braum to deny. Yes, from that 3 mighty pool. 5.
And I'm curious to see if High is actually just going to throw down this Radiant Guardian. The lifesteal is not super impactful in this matchup, but I feel like the tough is. And for that reason, we might see him just kind of hold back on any sort of aggression on this turn. Although there's not a lot that Orpheus could have to punish the Radiant Guardian. I think it is specifically Fury of the North, but that is still, it's kind of a blowout if that happens. All of a sudden, Braum is halfway to evolution. That Mighty Poro that used a concussive palm to deny is suddenly on the table, and I think we're not going to see any attacks at a high on this turn.
Or probably he, or, but highly unlikely that.
Yeah, this turn 5 is kind of a weak point for this Karma Lux deck. You don't have anything that you can really set up since Karma was bumped up to 6 mana back in patch 1.2. That was, turn 5 was kind of a fine turn. You'd curve the Karma into the Lux. Things worked out beautifully for you, but that's just not the case anymore. And now this turn's looking real awkward. But Orpheus doesn't have a whole lot that he can run out either. We could get the Swain down, and that's sort of the best development that Orpheus could have here. But next turn, High gets down the Lux. He's not super threatened by just a Swain and a Braum, and he can start to take over the game from there.
Yep, and especially speaking of which, he plays the Blinding Assault over here and waiting for this move. Here comes the Babbling Beard, and we believe he could go for the Radiant Guardian at this point of time.
Yeah, this is where the tempo kind of swings back into High's favor, at least for the time being. Once we get to turn 8, things go back to Orpheus, but turn 6 and 7, those are High's pivotal turns when it comes to sort of swinging this game back into his favor.
Here we see High not knowing what to do. He's so stressed up right now.
Yeah, that Fury of the North, the mana for that is still available from Orpheus. The the Radiant Guardian will survive the trade if she comes down with the toughness, but that's still halfway to a leveled Braum. That's a lot of damage pushed onto your Guardian, and overall, it's probably not worth it to attack with the Guardian this turn.
Attacking with the Veiler. So here comes the Radiant Guardian immediately.
Looks like High is agonizing over this decision.
So afraid of the Fury of the North.
And for good reason, too. Orpheus did take it slow the first couple of turns. That's usually indicative of either a spell heavy hand or an expensive hand. And since, that Leviathan is the only thing in the deck that costs more than 5 mana, on turn 5 playing a Berg, keeping over exactly that amount of mana is definitely going to be a couple of red flags for High, who is just going to hold back the attack.
Here we see a Lux off the top. And probably his best out right now would be that Consider Strike. So Braum. You could just, play more reactively. But Orpheus do.
Yeah, I don't think he cares too much about the Mighty Poro at this point in the game. I think getting this Lux down is a lot more impactful. And as we had mentioned, Orpheus doesn't have a lot of removal for the Lux in the form of 1 card. It is going to take at least 2 cards strung together. And the turn that Lux comes down, it's probably going to take 3 cards because she has that barrier on her.
Unless it's going to be an Iceveil Archer into Colin Strike, then that would be a different story.
Yeah, that is a combo that we had talked about a little bit earlier, especially in the Braum Mirror is sort of the one way to deal with Leviathan. That is a complete and total possibility to come down here. But it looks like instead it is going to be Swain getting developed and the Braum's Take Heart.
This is the thing about Braum is that it's so difficult to kill.
Yeah, Braum historically plays really well into Demacia decks specifically. Even the control versions like this Karma Lux, they're still pretty board based. Getting the attack onto that Braum, it's going to get leveled relatively soon, and then it's going to hit that pivotal 5 attack breakpoint. It actually really, I think 6 attack is really more the breakpoint in this game. That's where you take out, Radiant Guardians with tough, leveled up Luxes, but 4 is going to get pretty much everything else cleaned up and get things down to 1 HP for you to be able to remove them with your Death's Hand, your Noxian Fervors, your Ravenous Flocks.
Right. So I don't think Hai is in a good position to attack right now.
Yeah, Hai really has not been able to find himself in an attack-worthy position in quite some time. So far, it looks like it might even just be another Blinding Assault into another Radiant Guardian. Although I do think he wants to use this Concerted Strike to take out the Braum relatively soon. It's a little awkward. You know, we had talked a lot about how this Braum Swain deck is powerful because it has an overwhelming amount of threats that are just very large. Braum comes down, Swain comes down. You have to have the exact answer lining up onto these. And the Concerted Strike into the Final Spark is not enough to take out 2 of these units. It's going to take out 1. It's going to soften up another one. And I'm curious to see if Hai actually wants to throw that Final Spark onto something like the Iceveil Archer or the Mighty Poro to clear up the board, or if he wants to soften up the Swain or the Braum.
Let's see what Hai's gonna do this turn. Gonna pick on the Iceveil Archer. Looks so confused right now.
Okay, so this is pretty good. This does set you up for the Concerted Strike into the Final Spark to actually kill the Swain. I think that your Lux is about to die to a Culling Strike. I can't think of a phenomenal reason for that Iceveil Archer to come out otherwise. And it looks like Hai's actually just going to pass, wants to see the Culling Strike come out first, wants to confirm that it's there, and then he can kind of go for the plays like this. He does luckily still have the 8 damage available between the Radiant Guardian and the Badger Bear to actually kill the Braum.
And, you know, he might be saving the Concerted Strike for something much more of a danger level, like Leviathan.
Yeah, we are going to see Leviathan, you know, on the table to come down next turn, but he decides that this 4/8 Braum is enough of a threat, as well as just how cleanly this Final Spark is going to play into the Swain this turn.
With 3 mana, does Orpheus have any way to clear Badger Bear? There's a chance of a Culling Strike coming down on Badger Bear as well.
Yeah, Culling Strike, Noxian Fervor. There's a couple of things that he could have here, and it looks like he does have one of them available to him.
Yep, and then Ravenous Flock coming down onto Badger Bear, allowing Orpheus's Braum to survive yet another.
That was the one card I didn't name. I hate it when players do that, where I'm like, he has this answer, and they're like, what about this third answer? And I'm like, it was in my head. I just didn't say it out loud. You know, cut me some slack. And this does mean the Final Spark is going to have to be committed to the Braum. It's not going to be able to get used to take out the Swain here, which is a little bit scary. We do know that the Leviathan is coming down next turn. The Swain was kind of the priority target here. It was just a little bit too juicy to throw the Concerted Strike onto the Braum, because if you Concerted Strike onto the Swain, yes, you have a higher chance of killing that unit, but then you don't have an answer for this Braum. And now Hai is going to be able to get down this second Lux, but it's really not going to get a whole lot done. That single combat is the last spell in his hand, and this Lux is not powerful enough to take out the Swain or the Leviathan on her own. Is going to need to find a Karma relatively soon, get to start doubling up on spells like that, of course. Then it gets a little bit risky because you are single combating your own unit twice as well. He's really going to want to string together a couple of Concerted Strikes or something along those lines. Honestly, I think that Hai needs Karma on this next turn, and he needs it to live if he's going to have a chance. He needs that randomly created spell, or, you know, just a deep meditation off the top. There's a couple of ways that Hai can get back into this one, but overall, it's not looking good for him right now.
It seems like he got the remembrance of the top of his deck, and he seems like a bit of a trouble at this.
Yeah, Orpheus could string together a couple of cards to kill that Lux, and then I think at that point it's GG.
I mean, here we see a Radiant Guardian. So if he actually picked off a Fifth Ring Lancer over here, it would best pick. But it seems like right now, attacking with the failure and then final spark onto the best answer for him.
I feel like we are so consistently seeing Radiant Guardians pop out of these remembrances. I think we've seen one Swiftling answer and everything else has been Radiant Guardian.
Game.
Okay, and here we see Hai actually diversifying his damage portfolio, you know, throwing the final spark onto the Leviathan rather than killing the Swain, setting it up for a potential single combat on the following turn.
Go for a single combat right now. Onto the Leviathan.
I think it's risky. It's not super risky. You know, none of his units are damaged, so we're not going to see that Swain's Ravenous Flock come out of his hand yet. It's more of a question of what does he actually want to throw the damage onto, because anything that he single combats into this Leviathan is either going to die straight away or die to the Ravenous Flock. So I think you want to use it on that, you know, Radiant Guardian that has lifesteal and tough. The concern then is that you don't get your other Radiant Guardians down. You do likely get that Ravenous Flock out of your opponent's hand, or at least a Death's Hand, as well as get the Leviathan off the field. But if Orpheus even just slams down another Leviathan after all is said and done, that's going to feel terrible for Hai. But with Orpheus passing the way that he is, I don't think that's what we're going to see here.
I might be going for the Guardian play. And I believe this might be the best play I could possibly have.
Yeah, the one sort of concern is that now if Noxian Fervor does come out of Orpheus, that is going to level up the Swain, who is currently sitting at 7 out of 12. Could even just throw the Ravenous Flock down onto one of his own units. Not going to be the case. That would have been a little bit wild, but Swain pivotally does not level up going into Hai's turn, so the attack turn for Orpheus is sort of off the table. Wants to just sit here and wait until next turn when the Leviathan will level the Swain. But Hai now has Karma.
Yeah, and you know, coming with the Babbling Beard, that also means Orpheus have the second copy of Leviathan in his hand.
And this is like not a good position for Hai.
Hai is in such bad position right now.
Hai needs to play the Karma here and then top deck Deep Meditation. And I think it has to be Deep Meditation specifically. That's going to give you, you know, the most amount of Final Sparks. You're going to be able to double up the Final Sparks. And I think Hai feels like he has to take that pass, because even if he gets down the Karma, that means that Orpheus gets down the Leviathan. And Orpheus just has his arm on, you know, Hai's throat here, just applying this serious pressure to him, saying, I know you have cards in your hand that you want to play, but if you do anything, there's another Leviathan coming down at you.
So a Mage Seeker coming down, and it seems like Hai is not drawing like a good player right now. Iceville Archer coming down onto the Radiant Guardian. So it seems like Karma is the best play right now. No?
I would think it was Karma, but I guess Hai wants to... Oh, no, this makes sense. Yeah, Hai wants to get that Leviathan off the board, and the Mage Seeker's actually going to be able to get that done since it is, you know, 4/3, and could potentially even single combat the Swain, and this could be the stumble that Hai was sort of waiting for. Orpheus cannot develop Leviathan and Swain in the same turn.
As long as, you know, both are not on the board at the same time, Hai probably has the get advantage right now.
Yeah, he's still got to find some spells to take advantage of this Karma Lux combination. Though single combat is not enough. He's got to find something else.
Here comes a Fury of the North coming down onto Leviathan.
That is not what you want to see.
Here we see the disappointment in High Space over here. Does that mean that he has to go for the kill on the Swain right now?
I think so. Otherwise, you're left with, you know, a Radiant Guardian that doesn't have tough and lifesteal and a Shadow Assassin as your blockers. He's going to get down another Radiant Guardian. So it's going to be 2 Radiant Guardians and a Lux stunned over on the side of Orpheus. But, you know, as we had mentioned, there's a lot of stun available in a deck like this. He also has that Ravenous Flock available to him. He can take out that damaged Radiant Guardian right now if he really wants to.
So who do you think should be, like, you know, removed right now? Is it the Swain, or should Could it be Leviathan?
I think Swain is the higher priority target once this Ravenous Flock comes. Actually, so the problem with killing Swain is that Orpheus could just play another Swain, but that would mean that he had to draw the third Swain. You know, Leviathan can come down next turn. That'll draw the Swain again. But I think that tempo wise, you need to kill the Swain and then just kind of really hope that Orpheus doesn't have that third copy, and then you still need to top deck an out.
Yep, and I over here contemplating to single combat Swain right now with this, but with the targeted Radiant Guardian, fearing that he might have another Ravenous Lock in his hand. So probably attacking with the clean Radiant Guardian is the best choice right now.
So this is something that I don't think has ever actually come up for me before, which is a little surprising. If Hai were to single combat and kill this Radiant Guardian, then the Ravenous Flock were to fizzle. Does Orpheus get a Swain shuffled into his deck then?
No, the spell would be just gone.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Here we see a single combat.
Yeah, and he has to use a healthy Radiant Guardian for this one, not wanting to open himself up to the possibility of a second Ravenous Flock.
This is possibly the best block for Hai over here. Bringing his health back to 20 and putting himself out of this. And here we see 2 more spells coming from Orpheus.
What could he have that kills a Radiant Guardian that's 2 spells? He would need 3 spells, I think. 2 Noxian Fervors only pushes 4 damage.
3, and here comes the third spell.
Oh
and wow! Does Orpheus have 3 spells to deal with it? And here comes the first Ravenous Block, second Ravenous Block, and a Culling Strike onto the Radiant Guardian. This literally destroys Hai's board. Yeah, but that also means Orpheus is out of burn spell options.
Yeah, we actually did see the third Swain in his hand. That was a Swain's Ravenous Flock that came down there. Orpheus going to lose the Swain here, but, does just get to run out a boat on the following turn. This is sort of, Hai's one chance to get back into it, but he's got a really weak hand for doing something like that. The Leviathan survived. Karma's now on the table and ready to come down, but there's no Lux. There's no spells to pair with the Karma. Hai is still in a really bad position, and Orpheus is going to be able to get down a second Leviathan.
Oh, it seems like Hai is actually having his back against the wall right now. With this particular attack. I don't see how Hai is gonna.
Yeah, and we had kind of highlighted, Karina as what we thought was the weak point of this lineup for Hai, but so far he has not been doing a good job of picking up any wins with sort of his perceived stronger decks in this Karma Lux. And Orpheus's last deck, I believe, is the Deep, and I don't think Karma Lux pairs particularly well into that one either.
So here we see a Karma coming down from Hai side of the board. Probably would see a second Leviathan coming down from Orpheus, pushing 6 damage onto Hai's Nexus even before the rounds begin.
Yeah, and I think Hai might actually have to single combat just to take out one of these Leviathans. The Swain is sort of a secondary threat to the fact that you are dead in 3 turns if your opponent just hits here and passes back and forth.
So passing over for Orpheus is kind of dangerous as well, as he might have a Ravenous Flock in his hand and and the Wheel of Ionia.
This is nothing, right? Like I'm pretty sure Hai is just dead here. He needed to find Deep Meditation and get 4 new spells into hand. 1 Will of Ionia is not going to be enough at this point.
And we're probably gonna see a Swain coming in down this as well, and starting all 4 creatures, all 4 creatures, high spot.
Yeah, and at that point, Orpheus can attack for lethal, or he can just pass and let the Leviathans deal another 6 damage. I think Hai's going to have to actually Will of Ionia one of these Leviathans after the Swain comes down, and Orpheus isn't going to fall for it. He says, I don't even need the Swain. If you play a Will of Ionia, I'm going to replay the Leviathan. And Orpheus is playing this one phenomenally.
Comes a combat coming down from onto
I
the
mean, we saw
Leviathan.
so many Ravenous Flocks run out. It's not likely he has another one. The Fury of the
And the
North.
Fury of the North. Oh, this is so devastating for Hai right now.
Yeah, and Hai looking a little tilted. Didn't even will of Ione in response in order to get that off the table, and actually just going to will the Swain instead of one of the Leviathans, and that still just does represent lethal when these actually go for their attacks.
Hai. Brom coming down. And a second Karma. A Karma Insight over here might save Hai over here. See how much of a good player is he right now.
What spells can you get here, Hai, that are going to get you out of this one? Judgment
Wheel
is
of
on the
Ionia.
table.
Repulse. Single combat. Stand united.
I was really
Wow.
hoping for Judgment. That would
Yeah.
have been something.
Huge.
Yeah, I don't think these spells are enough to get it done. You do get to kill both Leviathans potentially. You're still taking 3, 4 damage. And okay, so this is an interaction that a lot of people get tripped up by. Because Karma will double the stand united, the units will swap and then swap right back.
Yeah, and Karma will still be back at Brom.
Yeah, so I mean, you do have the riposte to push the 8 damage onto that other Leviathan.
Might be tempted to go for the other 6 mana card. Redouble Vela.
That's a slow spell. I think he's dead on these attacks currently. I think it was 7 damage being pushed through by all these overwhelm units. So yeah, he has to go for riposte single combat.
Self to 5 health. I'm sure. Oh, of course, Orpheus have an answer to a Cullen Strike onto the Badger Bear.
That is lethal because the Leviathan then survives and will be able to just push that 3 damage through at the start of turn.
This is probably it for game number 2.
Yeah. That was a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. Like, Hai hung in there for quite some time, and there was potential for that Karma's Inside of Ages to completely turn the game around. You know, if we saw Judgment come off of that Karma's Inside of Ages, then Hai would have just completely stolen that game.
Right, but I mean, the Karma Insight didn't really give him much of an option, and he's still sticking into this luck Karma, moving on into game number 3 with Orpheus D right over here. And it feels like Hai is in a very disadvantage in this particular matchup.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Karma Lux into a deck like this. You know, the Maokai win condition is very much on the table, but we did identify this as Orpheus's weak point because he is not playing as much to that Maokai win con. You know, going a little bit more into an aggro-based format, decided that that was the card he wanted to cut down on, as well as Jettison. So it's possible that we just don't see the Maokai level up. And if that doesn't happen, there's actually not a lot of tools to stop Hai from getting the Karma Lux combo online.
Here we see a Drip Boom Runner coming down on 3 from Orpheus. I mean, the deep deck is still the Orpheus weakest deck for this whole competition. So meaning Hai actually might have chance to come back from this and win from games down, and it's still not impossible for Hai to do this.
Yeah, Orpheus is kind of playing the role of the aggressor here. Plays a 2-drop and a 3-drop, but Hai, has the Badger Bear to kind of stave this one off. And turns 4 and 5 are kind of the weak points for both of these decks. Hai gets to throw down a Remembrance, and that's probably the strongest thing. He has to take turn 5 off, then Lux gets to come down. Luckily, that's something that absolutely cannot be destroyed by Devourer of the Depths on that turn 6. There's no way Orpheus is going to be deep by that.
And here
point,
we see once again the Radiance
Kinsey.
Guardian coming down from the Remembrance. Dude, this is gonna be a Remembrance set. A Radiant Guardian set.
Is Remembrance bugged? Is it
Or
only capable of pulling Eve cards?
here we see a Maokai coming down from Orpheus' side. So if Orpheus could rush Maokai's level up a bit, Hai could be in a huge trouble against this.
Yeah, it looks like Hai is actually considering throwing a Will of Ionia onto that Maokai. Sort of the one way that you are set up to lose a game like this is Orpheus getting this Maokai down on 4, getting it uncontested. The lack of jettisons don't mean as much if you are consistently tossing every turn when you play units, and you cannot let that Maokai level up. Hai is going to have 2 Luxes available to him. So if the Maokai does level, he can at least not lose to the deck out condition by consistently shuffling Prismatic Barriered Luxes back into his deck. If he can get the Karma out onto the field, that is 2 Luxes going back into the deck every time, and it's not as much of a problem. And that's typically where we see the Lux Karmas winning matchups like this, is when your opponent all-ins on this Maokai win con, and it doesn't work out for them because you do have so many champions in hand already.
There is probably would see a Lux into Remembrance next deal of the Maokai with the final spark. That is probably the best play that Hai could have against Maokai right now.
Yeah, and Orpheus not running Vengeance, this is sort of the matchup where it has a lot of potential to keep up with him, or catch up with him rather, and really play against him here.
I have to skip the block over here, bringing here's one more card closer. Keep
I've said it before. I'm gonna say it again. I love Abyssal Eye. This card is so good. Everybody should be running Abyss. If you're running a Bilgewater deck, put Abyssal Eye in there. You want a Plunder activator? How about a 3/3 elusive that draws you a card?
and it will like hit the opponent Nexus end of time.
Pretty much. And here's that Remembrance you were talking about. Going to give him the final spark. Going to let him take out the Maokai.
And
And
a
that's
Swiftwing
one Maokai
Lancer.
down.
So a Swiftwing Lancer over here would be for Hai over here as well, as you could take off some picks. The Maokai right now, or even the Abyssal Hai.
Yeah, this actually looks like a pretty good turn for Hai here. Going to be able to get that Will of Ionia onto the Nautilus, going to get the final spark onto the Maokai. Things are actually starting to turn back in his favor potentially. We do see Deep now on the side of Orpheus, though he doesn't have anything on board to take advantage of that outside of the Abyssal Eye. And Hai feels safe to throw out this final spark before he throws out the Will of Ionia. The only sea monster you can get down for 0 mana with the Nautilus is the Beast Below, and of course, nobody main decks that card.
They receive final spark on Maokai. Now currently with 6/6 in his health right now. That's right now we have Abyssal Eye being the biggest wall for Hai to attack at this point of time.
Yeah, and this is a really rough position for Hai. You can't really afford to let this Abyssal Eye continue to attack you, but you also can't afford to use your Will of Ionia on it. You need to save that commitment for the Nautilus that Orpheus is going to continue to try to put down. And because Orpheus got down a deep Nautilus on 7, Hai is just a little bit too far away from his upgraded Karma to really get his own game plan online. And I'm pretty sure Orpheus is going to be able to pick this one up unless Hai can pull out a miracle.
Hai debating himself if his current attack and press confirm button to kill off Tony Toad right over here, milling 2 more cards off Orpheus' deck, and that is the last copy of Abyssal Eye for Orpheus.
Yeah, and now Hai is out of mana, which means that if this Nautilus comes down, if he wants to Will of Ionia it, that's pretty much his entire turn. And if he goes for the Karma otherwise, this is kind of the one turn he's almost safe to do so. We do still have Nautilus's Riptide available for Orpheus, but Devourer of the Depths isn't really a consideration just yet.
Yeah, with Orpheus being at 1 mana, what could possible right now?
It's just the second copy of Abyssal Eye, which of course would be absolutely terrifying in this scenario for Hai, as that is, 12 elusive damage and 2 draws for your opponent coming at you. We do see that Concerted Strike is probably going to have to come out on the following turn when the Eye goes to attack. And I think Hai is just kind of debating, is this the best time to Will of Ionia this Nautilus?
Doesn't seem like that he's going Velo, blinding assault over here, summoning himself a Vela.
Yeah, and this is sort of the most non-committal play that he could make to start off the turn. Does get that final spark now.
As the Wheel of Ionia. Chili.
Looks like there is going to be an answer. I think this could be the Nautilus's Riptide just trying to get this Lux off the table for Hai while the sort of the shields are down for Hai. Doesn't have that deny mana, doesn't have anything available to him. It's going to be a little bit harder for Hai to redevelop. He's going to play Lux, but Orpheus is going to play Nautilus, and that plays out a lot better for Orpheus, especially since he'll have that 2 mana left over to get down a Devourer of the Depths.
Here we see a Riptide immediately shuffling Lux back into the deck, but however, Hai have the second copy of Lux in his hand right now, so it should be fine. Hai at this point of time.
Yeah, now he is vulnerable to the Maokai win condition, though. And Orpheus has tossed a couple more units are dying. It's not out of the question for him to just throw down an upgraded Maokai. And without that Lux on board and Lux in hand, Hai is going to be vulnerable to a strategy like that. Never mind.
He has the second Lux. Orpheus trying to kill off them.
Yeah, Hai's not going to love to see that one, but it does mean that Orpheus doesn't have any mana available to play sea monsters this turn as he does get down the Nautilus. And I think that means that Hai is going to be a little bit more inclined to go for something like this Karma and get a doubled up Concerted Strike off on the following turn.
Power of this.
This does still give him the option to play Karma this turn, as well as, keep as many units alive as possible. He needs blockers for the Nautilus. Orpheus is going to be able to push through another 6 damage with that Abyssal Eye. And this card's really just adding up against him. He's gotten one final spark down onto it, but it's not quite enough. And it looks like he is... Okay, I forgot that he had the attack token. He is actually going to be able to take out the Abyssal Eye, as well as gain a bit more life. And so far, Hai going to be able to play the Karma after the fact as well. I would assume that's what's going to come out over the Lux. And that was a terrible elite to pull.
Probably the one.
Yeah, that or Cythria of Cloudfield. There's a couple of bad elites out there.
And the Steel Tempest of that Karma is gonna be stunning the attacking Nautilus over there. Make a difference.
Yeah, not only that, but it's a 3-mana spell that actually gets used twice, so that will get a final spark available for him. And we know that Orpheus is going to go for this Nautilus. So now Karma gets to come down. Or sorry, Lux gets to come down. Lux can actually block the Nautilus because she'll have barrier. If Orpheus wants to play something in response to pop the barrier, Hai is free to go for that Steel Tempest. And if Orpheus doesn't do something and wants to go for that Nautilus's Riptide, Hai has the deny available.
Hai actually has so much more options right now in his hand. Could he, him right now before that Maokai comes down?
Yeah, I think even with this, if Maokai comes down at this point, because Hai has that Lux in his hand, he's going to be in a good spot. This was sort of the worst case scenario. You feel like you have to deny this. Maybe he just throws out the Concussive Palm instead, gets the final spark, plays the doubled up final spark, but that's, not going to play out for him super well. I think Hai is really looking for something in the pool of, am I allowed to use this deny, or are there more things coming out that are going to stop me? I think he was looking to see if Devourer of the Depths had been tossed previously.
Hai here is probably going to be best out over for Hai. Probably blocking Lux as well.
Yeah, and this is a scary position for Hai. Orpheus does have Vile Feast mana available if he wants to pop that barrier and let Nautilus run over the Lux. I think if Hai wants to play this as safely as possible, he actually has to block with the Radiant Guardian. But it feels like a wasted opportunity if Orpheus doesn't have that Vile Feast.
Here we see a Vile Feast coming down in Lux. Immediately. following the deny.
This is definitely strange to me. I feel like that was sort of your blowout potential once the Lux was lined up as a blocker, but now that High knows it's coming, he's definitely just going to throw the Radiant Guardian under the Nautilus, let that Devour of the Depths go sort of uncontested, and it's possible that that's the plan, and High is going for an Atrocity Lethal on the following turn, as High will be at 13.
Like he has to go for the block over here as he has the and Lux available for him.
Yeah, with that Vile Feast not coming out in combat, it definitely feels like, Orpheus is trying to bait High into not blocking this, going for the Atrocity Lethal. So High seems to be recognizing that and is playing this one very well. Going to throw the Lux under the bus. It does make his next couple of turns a little bit more awkward. It does open him up to the potential Nautilus, or not Nautilus, Maokai Lethal without those additional champions in hand. But, High's a skilled player. He might just draw another Karma here.
Here we see a second Blinding Assault coming in from High. And Binding Assault over here might make a difference of the Devourer of the Deep.
Yeah, and actually just getting down this barriered up Lux is also going to be pretty impactful. It does mean that you're kind of free to attack. It's only going to take a Spiderling off the board. It's not super impactful, but now High has to be, conscientious of the fact that Orpheus has a randomly created sea monster. And if it is a Devourer of the Depths, I think that is just going to be all she wrote here.
High is going for the Blinding Assault over here.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to value, being able to take out this Devourer of the Depths as well as the Jaw Hunters. This does mean he doesn't have the opportunity to get a final spark this turn, but a proactive concussive palm also feels really weird. At any point, if we see Nautilus's Riptide come out, this is just going to be GG. And High could just get 3-0'd right here, depending on that spell on the stack. And it is Nautilus's Riptide. It's not even Nautilus's Riptide, it's the main decked Riptide.
There's a huge Riptide coming on side of the board. And it seems like, High is probably have his back for right now, and it's very, very unfavorable for High at this point of time into
Yeah, he's still got a couple of stuns available to him, so he could come back into this one. The Mist Call is going to bring back either the Jaw Hunters or the Devourer of the Depths. I think Orpheus is pretty fine with either one. I think he'd prefer the Jaw Hunters. He still hasn't played that randomly created sea monster.
and a second comma off top for High. Probably High could go for stun. Passive Palm over here, creating 2 more defender for himself. Ooh, when Devourer of the Dead onto the comma over here. Like High's running out of options.
Yeah, I mean, High can throw down the Concussive Palm onto the Nautilus. That gives him 2 blockers for the other sea monsters. He can redevelop the Karma after the fact. But, that's not really helping you win the game. It's just kind of delaying the inevitable. You're using a lot more resources than your opponent. But he does, for once, have kind of the spells available to him. If he does top deck a Lux, he can kind of get back into this one.
Yeah, here we see a Karma Insight coming in from High, looking in for options. And he has a Key Guided Ranger's Resolve Health Pod. These 4 spells are not going to help him.
So this is actually pretty good for High. He can throw out the Concussive Palm here onto the Nautilus that gives him 2 blockers, and then he can actually use the Shadow Flare to clear out Orpheus's entire board except for the Nautilus, but instead he's going to go for the doubled up Key Guardian.
And following up with Palm.
Yeah, this does take the Shadow Flare off. That was the one instance where he could have gotten Shadow Flare sort of value. And, generally you see Shadow Flare and you're just like, okay, I'll discard this to something a little bit later on. It's possible that High didn't think about it or thought that, there was something that he needed to draw. Perhaps, just a second copy of Deny and, try to get him out of this one. But it's not going to do it.
I really focus coming in. Vanguard first play. And the Terror of the Tides. Lethal. And that should be lethal for Orpheus over here. And this is the end of the road for High over here, and we see a sad Poro emo coming from High. Yep, and here we see High contemplating for the scoop. Yeah, he's going for the scoop, and here we have Orpheus winning High, our previous DOR check.